Hello and welcome to the very first one-on-one podcast, and today I'm one-on-one with TAM COWAN, fellow Motherwell fan, journalist, food critic and radio presenter. How you doing, Tam? All right?
I'm very well, Stephen. Are you still signing autographs after being on off the ball?
No, look at the state of my horn for signing them. Jesus Christ. Right, but no, it was a pleasure to be on. How lockdown treating you? Lockdown part 2?
I'm just a bit fed up doing so much of my life via Zoom or Skype or Facebook Live. I've not had a microphone in my hand now since March in terms of doing a live event or standing up in front of an audience and having a laugh, a joke and a carry on. So I'm really missing that. It means as well that the next thing I do as much as I've always been happy to do stuff for the Motherwell Disabled Supporters Association and give up my time fees, it means that the next one that I do, once lockdown's over and done with, I'll be charging you £15,000, okay?
I better hope my DLA gets ramped up then, otherwise I'm not going to be able to afford that, I'm afraid, Tam. But no, I see that during the lockdown you took to Instagram a lot. Is that something that's been good for you? It
was just a good laugh. It was like keeping in touch with your audience almost, if you like, because it's a funny thing when you go into the reason that I love doing live events as much and after dinner speaking and hosting events and all the rest of it is you can't beat being in front of an audience. And the strange thing is when you're doing the radio, when you experienced it with me and Stuart Cosgrove recently, me and Stuart sat in a studio, and as much as we're very grateful for having a big audience out there that's tuned in our cars or sitting in the house or whatever, you've not got an immediate audience. So that's why live events and stuff are great. And when I joined Instagram last year and started putting up wee daft videos and songs and jokes and all that, I suddenly built up quite a big audience there, and it's just great getting feedback from folk. All the stuff, the wee things that you put on your storyboard, for example, yeah. I get literally hundreds every day of people in my direct messages sending me wee jokes and all that, and they know that I love putting music to them, kind of thing. It's almost like a hobby of mine now, and it's a great way as well, like whatever you're up to at the BBC or what work does remain, that you can keep folk up to date with what you're getting up to. And as long as you always take the piss out yourself, then I kind of quite like all that stuff, because you get some folk go on social media and they maybe take it a wee bit seriously and all that. But I think first and foremost, you should always take the mickey out yourself.
I would definitely agree with that, mate. And I think that's something that particularly Scottish people are good at, is that self-deprecating humour. And it's certainly something...
Absolutely.
Certainly,
see that. I mean, see they talk about that, because I know that you like you, and I think that's great. You love making jokes about your own condition, about your own disability, and to give you a wee example, the strange world that we live in. When you flagged up on Instagram the other day that you were getting me on to do this with you, and the response, if you remember, I put a wee comment saying, "Oh, it's amazing the things I'll do to get a wee shot of your blue badge," right? But there was loads and loads of folk. I would only have made that joke because I know you like the jokes, exactly. And I believe you should be able to laugh about everything, But there was loads of must have been your followers or some of your pals or whatever, liked that, ha, and all the rest of it. I get one person who sent me a direct message saying that he was disgusted that I would make such a joke about that, about someone who's got a disability. And I explained to him, just as I've said to you, I says, "Mate, calm down." I said, "I wouldn't have made the joke if I didn't know the guy, which I do." I said, "In fact, I grew up with his father." I said, "Played football with his father." I said, "B, I wouldn't have made the joke if Stephen didn't do the jokes himself." And I said, "C, it has got actually absolutely nothing to do with you. It was a post that he'd put up and I had responded to. And, but you can't win."
No, you can never win, everybody. And can I just say to that guy that has sent you that message, if he's watching this, I doubt he is, because he probably hates your humour if that's anything to go by, but no, I think if you can't joke about something and if you take offence to it, that gives bullies a strength. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
To then get at you, whereas if you just laugh it off, then they're absolutely powerless. So these words only hurt if you give them meaning. See, if you just laugh and have a joke, It's completely
sometimes though you just got to bite your tongue. There's been a few dues that I've been at. There was one that was at it was one of the first things I think I did for the Disabled Supporters Association thing, and I can't mind who it was now. It wasn't yourself, but there was somebody there and he was slaughtering me the whole night, and I absolutely loved it. You know, you just go on with it. I laugh, a joke, and I carry on.
Aye, exactly. And you mentioned that you worked with the DSA there, and obviously you're one of the lucky ones that have been back in Fir Park during all this. You got to go to the Motherwell St Johnstone game at the weekend.
That's right.
What was it like being back? It must have been weird.
Rubbish. It was absolutely garbage, because see, when I was sitting, Stephen, I was lucky that the first when was the first? I got in first up for the Glentoran game, right? The BBC, good on them. They knew that I was champing at the bit to go to a game, and they thought, well, we don't really have a lot of pundits anyhow that support Motherwell, so they very nicely asked me along to do the game that night. John Barnes was doing the commentary, Alan Biscuits Preston was doing his punditry bit, and I was like the additional one. And it was only actually a wee bit of quirk of fate that got me there in the first place, because James McFadden was meant to be doing it that night, but his wee lassie had been sent home from school that day with a dry, continuous cough. So suddenly they were in a wee bit of COVID panic. Faddy couldn't go to Fir Park that night. He wasn't allowed to leave the house. So they were definitely going to ask me along. But see, when I went that night, as much as it was great being there, and I was very proud as a Motherwell fan to be broadcasting on the BBC at a Motherwell game, that night, and then the other week there, when me and Cosgrove were asked to do open all mics on Radio Scotland for the Motherwell St Johnstone Betfred Cup game. If I tell the truth, it was actually rotten, and I hated it, because see, as much as we were in there watching the game, we were sat right up the back in the media section, and I just kept looking down the front, row D, where I normally sit with my pals pre-COVID, and I thought, it's not the same. I just wanted to be sitting down there, having a laugh, and I carry on with my pals, going for a bovril or whatever at half-time, you know, and if it was, in my case, a midweek game or that, we work in the weekend with the radio, being able to go out after it, maybe down to the Centenary Suite or out to Club 100 for a pint, and then if there was time, down to the Indian Villa in Motherwell for a wee curry or something, you know. You absolutely miss all of that. I miss it like crazy. So I must say, as much as I was very, very lucky to get into a couple of games this season, working on them with the BBC, I can't honestly say hand in heart that I enjoyed it.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, because I went and I done a wee interview for Motherwell's media, and they asked me what's the thing that you miss the most. And for me, it's literally just everybody at the DSA, because it's a friendly at the end of the day, isn't it? It's that camaraderie.
Aye.
And
Aye.
I heard you mention that you say that when you go and sit down as well, you'll never say to your pals, "Oh, I've just came from my work" and all that.
Oh no, they would book my balls. I mean, you experienced it when you came in and did Off the Ball a few weeks ago, and it was terrific. You get such a great response. I didn't tell you at the time, but Professor Jason Leitch get back on to me after the show. He texted me and he said that young man that you had on, the Motherwell fan, he was magnificent. So you get his praises as well. But when no, sorry, it wasn't you. It was that was another week he was talking about. It was another guest. Sorry, but just before you get too bored, he did. But no, he did. He said that he thought you were fantastic, and he was one of the guys, amongst others. Who's the other boy in the DSA that he was meant to be going to Blackpool for his birthday a few weeks ago?
Is it wee Ross?
Was it Ross? And I got some videos done for him.
Aye.
I mean, that was absolutely incredible. Professor Leitch did one of them for him. It was Gillian Graham that asked me to do it, the treasurer at the DSA, and it was incredible. See, everybody asked, I just basically looked through my phone, and you know, all these famous people, Graham Souness, you know, Professor Leitch himself, Sanjeev Kohli, Lorraine Kelly, loads of them. I think they appreciated what a tough time it had been for everybody since March, for football fans since March, but then perhaps even, you know, the members of the disabled community who have really had a hard time. I know that wee Ross had a particularly hard time, and he had to have his birthday trip to Blackpool cancel. So when he did all that, they were great. But somebody like Professor Leitch, who, as you know, is a busy man, it's terrific that we get a wee half hour with him on a Saturday, and he's been so helpful with all sorts of other things that I've pestered him about. So he's great. But what I was going to say, though, sorry, I'm blabbing away here. What I was going to say, Stephen, was that when you saw the setup and off the ball, when you came in and did it with me and Stuart, I couldn't then leave that programme on a Saturday at 2 o'clock and go to Fir Park, sit with my mates who've been knocking their pan in all week. Some of them, by their own admission, doing shitey jobs and work that they don't necessarily enjoy. I couldn't then sit down with them and say, oh, I've just come from my work, you know. Because if I did, they would absolutely give me a few rapids for me getting paid to sit there with my pal, have star guests coming into the studio, sit and have a laugh, a joke, and a carry on about the football. I could never ever bring myself to call it work.
No, I get what you mean. You mentioned Professor Jason Leitch there. He's become a star in his own right, isn't he? Honestly, he's
absolutely. He's now my favourite person from Airdrie. And he's been absolutely brilliant. And you know what? Since day one, and you get the chance to hear it as well when you asked him a couple of questions that day you were in. And unlike a lot of figures like him, public figures, folk involved in politics, he's not a politician, but he's effectively, as the clinical director for Scotland, he is working with the Scottish Government, with SNP. It'd be very, very easy, and there'd be loads of other good examples of it, Stephen, of guys like him leaving punters absolutely bamboozled, talking in a language that none of us understand, being far too technical, far too scientific. But, you know, the couple of questions you'd asked him that day, the answers he gave you back, clear, concise, very, very easy to understand. And that's why he's been a big hit on our show and off the ball. And I absolutely hate it because we've taken up so much of his time. Now, he doesn't get paid. This is part of his job. What a lot of folk don't understand, when we were originally looking for somebody to come on back in March to talk about the coronavirus, and the minute all the football games were starting to get shut down and everything, I'll put you in the spot right away. Do you remember the very first Motherwell game that got cancelled?
It was Motherwell v Aberdeen.
Well done. The Friday night game. And I used to argue, I thought this is a great quiz question for years to come. What was the first Scottish football match cancelled because of COVID-19? And I thought I was going to be a smart ass years from now and be able to tell folk it was actually a Motherwell game, Motherwell against Aberdeen, but it's not, because that game was scheduled to kick off 7:45 on the Friday night, and it was actually, I think it was Ayr United against Queen of the South. It was due to kick off at 7:30, and it got called off as well. So, if you like, it hit the buffers first. But when we were looking for somebody to come on, Stephen, to talk about COVID-19, and you need to remember, back in March, before it had all really kicked in, Professor Jason Leitch wasn't quite as well known. A lot of folk time just said, oh, there's that wee guy that's been on the telly the last couple of nights. It's only in the ensuing weeks and months that he became a household name. But he was only too happy to come on off the ball, because, as you'll have heard when you were on it yourself, we're not a show that only talks about football. And we're not a show that likes sitting there talking about tactics or 4-2-4 formations, or why does he not play a sitting midfielder?
Everybody does that anyway, so why would you do that?
I know, nobody does that. When I'm sitting with my pals at Fir Park, or if we go to the pub after a game or that, we don't sit talking about all that shit. So we like opening it out. Because of that, which gets me back to Professor Leitch, it means that we've got a very wide demographic. We get old folk, young folk, men, women, kids, adults. We get everybody tuned into the show, which is we're very, very grateful for. So because of that, the Scottish Government and indeed Professor Leitch were aware that our show kind of has a wide audience, and that's why he was more than happy to come on our show to get his message across, because he knew, I mean, if he went on the jazz show on Radio Scotland, and Tuesday night at 10 o'clock or whatever, then the only folk he would be appealing to would be the sector of Scotland that's into jazz music, you know. So by coming on our show, a big show, lunchtime Saturday, lunchtime Sunday, he knows that he's able to get his message out there. So, but he's been brilliant, and me and Stuart have got a lot of time for him. And the minute I hear anybody, Snyder's trying to text or email and saying, why do you get this guy on? He's just a fucking dentist, you know. And you think, whoa. He was a dentist way back when. He was a dental surgeon. But every day in life, a lot of folks' careers changes. You'd be as well saying that when Sean Connery died and all the tributes were being paid to him, that's like somebody saying, what you paying tribute to Sean Connery for? He's just a milkman, you know. And you think, well, he was a milkman when he was growing up in Edinburgh. But that was a while ago. He went on to be one of our top movie actors, you know. So I've got a lot of time for Jason Leitch, and I like the way he gets his message across.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. I love the way that he answered my question. But something that I do remember them saying, right, way back then when we did this, it feels like ages ago now anyway, was that fans, we won't expect a full stadium come June for the Euros. Do you know that this vaccine came about? Do you think that he'll change his opinion on that?
Well, I mean, I know that I'm not getting any of your secrets away, but we're recording this, your podcast on a Friday, and we do have him back in tomorrow, which is Saturday. I don't know when you're going to publish this or whatever, but we basically have got, he told us, says anytime you need me on a Saturday, just try to give me a wee bit of notice, a wee bit of heads up, and I'll come on. Last week, it's a recurring question. We had him on last week because Dave Cormack of Aberdeen had the Aberdeen chairman. He contacted me directly, and he had asked. He said that he tunes into the show and all the rest of it. He listens when he's in America, and he was saying that he had a couple of questions for the professor that he couldn't get an answer to, and he'd emailed the Scottish Government, he'd emailed the SPFL, and it was nothing doing. So he knew that we'd had the professor on most weeks, and he wanted us to put a couple of questions to him, which we did. And we gave him, if you like, special privileges, Dave Cormack at Aberdeen, because we weren't due, the professor was basically going to have a week off last week. So we hadn't got him booked. But I said to my producer, Stevie, who you met when you were in, and I say, Stevie, listen, Dave Cormack has been in contact Aberdeen, a big club, Scotland's third club, I guess you would have to say. Is there any chance we could get the professor on? We can put these points to him. So we got him booked, and Dave Cormack was pretty happy about that. And the thing is that the minute we did get him on then last week, because we were starting to hear about the vaccine being rolled out, then that was the first question I asked him, Stephen. I said, what do you think now next year? I says, as things stand now, the European finals in England, Scotland playing at Wembley against England in June, was it 14th, 18th? I says, what do you think then? And he said, I really think absolutely the tournament will go ahead. There's no doubt about that now. But he was still hesitant about the idea of having full houses. I mean, I don't know what Wembley can hold now. It's something that's an incredible... Is it? Right. So I knew you would have known that. So if you think a crowd like that, I don't think even now that he reckons you would still be able to get a full house at Wembley come the summer. But great strides have been made day after day after day. So I'm interested, as I say, because we're doing this on a Friday, without getting any of your secrets away, we're recording this on Friday, December the 4th. And Saturday, December the 5th, we do have the professor booked back in. And again, because that's the big thing we're all looking forward to, I'll be asking them the same question.
Yep, and then we touched on the Euros there, and I loved watching the video that was shared to you, Stuart, and everybody when that penalty save was made. Can we expect a TAM COWAN Instagram Scotland song for the Euros?
Well, I can tell you exclusively, you know that I'd done all the daft songs and stuff when lockdown was the first time round, and I was doing all sorts of nonsense and parodies of songs and all the rest of it. I was basically, where I'm sitting now looking at you, just behind my phone there that's looking back at me, I've got my iMac, you know. And all I would do was, I'm not bad at doing it actually. I thought I would get a wee song in my head and I would like to put a wee twist on it for COVID-19 and lockdown and all that. And then whatever the famous song was that I would parody, I would just on my iMac, I would get up the karaoke video for that. And then that was my background music. And then I'd sing my song into the camera that I'm looking at now, you know. So I was thinking about for next year, I mean, everybody's already going, I think, a wee bit overboard with Yes Sir, I Can Boogie, because there's a fear that everybody will be sick of it long before next summer. I think we should have forget about it for a while, sweep it under the carpet until next summer, and then pick it up again. Because I do think it's a cracking song. It's one of my favourites, you know. And I love my old-fashioned music and that. And for that being a big 70s disco classic, that will do for me any day of the week. But I've actually with the boy Gary Innes, who presents now Take the Floor, and he's in the Scottish group Manran, big shinty player, and he's a marvellous musician. Gary had actually contacted me when we qualified. I know Gary pretty well, and he's talking about us trying to do a wee collaboration with maybe me doing some lyrics for a song and Gary doing the music, and seeing if we can maybe come up with something for Euro 2020 or 2021 as it will be. So I'm definitely going to have a wee go and see what happens, because I'm sure there'll be room for a few different songs, you know.
And obviously you're one of the lucky ones that can remember France 98. So for young people like myself, what is it I've got to look forward to? Because I'm absolutely buzzing. I'm buzzing.
Well, you know what, Stephen? When we started off the ball, I'd started it in 1994 with Greg Hemphill of Still Game fame presenting it, Sanjeev Kohli being like a panellist alongside me, right? Where are they now? You never hear of these guys now, Sanjeev and Greg, right?
You're the only one that didn't get an invite to Still Game. Fucking.
Well, exactly. I think I could have taken Still Game to the next level as well, but I didn't get an invite, you know, so I've got the petted lip. But no, I'll tell you what, neither Sanjeev or Greg have been asked to open the North Motherwell Gala Day.
There you go.
I have. Right. So when we did that for a year with Greg and Sanjeev and myself, right? And I was the only real true football fan that was on it. They all knew that, right? So they were wanting to revamp the show. So Stuart came in. That's the first time I met him. I first met Stuart, believe it or not, on the very first day we did a show together. So in the same way that you came into the studio a few weeks ago when you did the show and you met Stuart, that was like me meeting Stuart for the first time in 1995, August 1995, and we've been together ever since. But the reason I'm mentioning that is me and Stuart started as a wee partnership in 95. 1 year later, 1996, Scotland qualified for Euro 96 in England, and me and Stuart went down to England with the BBC. We went to the games. We were at the famous Wembley game with Gary McAllister's penalty, Gaza's great goal, the dentist chair celebration, blah, blah, blah. And we did programmes. Eh?
I said fucking Uri Geller moving the ball.
Aye, Uri Geller, aye, exactly. I'll tell you about him later as well, when I had him on the telly. It's a good story there. But we thought, this is tremendous. We were living in London, doing programmes just about every night and getting to go to the games and stuff. 2 years later, 1998, Scotland qualified for the World Cup in France. Me and Stuart are taken to France. We're put up in a hotel in France. We go to all the games. We do programmes every night. And me and Stuart at the time were thinking, this is great. This is going to happen every 2 years now. European Championships, World Cup, European Championships, World Cup. We've landed on our feet here. And lo and behold, that was it. Absolutely nothing since 1998. So I can assure you that when that clip went viral on social media, It was that night in the BBC, the Thursday night, David Marshall's penalty save. Me and Stuart were sitting there. We were getting ready to go in for an off-the-ball special right after the game. Sitting behind us, Stephen Thompson, Neil McCann and Stephen A. Smith, who were going in today, the highlights on Sports Scene. It was absolutely genuine, us leaping out our seat, because we thought, yeah, beauty. We might get a wee trip out of this. We might be allowed to go down to Wembley for the England game. We've got the 2 cracking home games with the Czech Republic and Croatia. So we were genuinely excited when you saw us jumping up and down in our seat.
Absolutely, and 2 points I want to make. I think it's such a Scottish thing to do in the most miserable year, end all that misery and have us qualify. I think it's the most Scottish thing ever. But you mentioned that you'd never met Stuart before you done your first show. One thing that struck me when I was in was the chemistry between the two. He's absolutely brilliant, by the way. Was it like that for the off? Was it right away? Did you just hit it off?
Well, fortunately we did, and the reason for that, I'll tell you the real reason for that. When I hooked up with Stuart, we were kind of chucked together, right? Now, Stuart at the time, he described it in print in an article that he had written. He described us that Stuart, that I was the coarse lump of Lanarkshire lard, and Stuart said that he was the posh Perthshire poof. Now, I immediately, even in your podcast, I apologise for using that P word. If you to use that particular word on the BBC now, you get sacked on the spot. It's one that's on the hit list, right? I'm only referring to that word historically for a way that Stuart summed up himself. So Stuart was basically meaning that the two of us, as far as the public were concerned, we were coming from absolutely different sides of the spectrum, you know. But when we actually met up and got to know each other, it quickly became apparent that we had a lot of stuff in common, because we were both brought up in housing schemes in Scotland. Stuart was brought up in a place called Letham in Perth, which was a big, massive council scheme. I was brought up in Motherwell, you know exactly where I was brought up, which was a big scheme as well, just round the corner for you and your dad and the family and all that. And the other big thing that bonded us right away, which is a very, very simple thing to bond us, particularly if you're doing a football show, we both did support what are classed as wee diddy teams. So Stuart with St Johnstone, me with Motherwell, and that meant that the minute we go on air together, we were able, both of us, to have a wee bit of a go at Celtic and Rangers, who up to that point, perhaps in 1995, the attitude towards Celtic and Rangers and the media at large, it had always been a wee bit suki. And we were able to kind of change that a wee bit, you know. And that got us a great audience out there immediately for Arbroath fans, Aberdeen fans, Queen of the South fans, etc., etc. So we had that wee bond right away. And, you know, that's just kind of matured down through the years. So that's been a good thing. I often think, and we don't know the answer to this because, you know, it's one of the big what ifs. I often wonder if in 1995, when they put me and Stuart together, if, let's say if I supported Celtic and Stuart supported Rangers, or the other way about, or if I support Motherwell and Stuart supported Celtic or Rangers, or he supported St Johnstone and I supported Celtic or Rangers, we sometimes wonder what the dynamic would have been, and would we still be here now, 25, 26 years later? The what?
Can I give you an honest opinion as a listener on that point?
Aye.
I think it would have worked, because I think what's so great about Off the Ball, and you've touched on it yourself, is that it takes the attention away from the old fun. And there's that laugh and that joke in amongst the football talk. So it's just a perfect blend for me, and it's something different, as you say, for fans outside the old firm.
Well, you know, exactly. I mean, there was, as we sit here speaking tonight, there was the two scores last night. Rangers get through to the knockout stages, Europa League, after beating Standard Liège. Celtic, it was a deed rubber anyhow, they get knocked out, but they lost 4 goals again. But you would imagine, because that was Thursday night, a football, I use the term lightly for us, but a football show on BBC Radio on a Saturday in Scotland, you imagine, would pour over those two results and analyse them and, you know, spend the whole show talking about them. But we know for a fact we won't do that. We'll mention them, of course, and we might get a wee laugh at the fact that, you know, Celtic get pumped again, if Rangers are getting pumped again, and that's happened in the history of the ball. Then on a programme like ours, of course, you have a laugh at which one of the big two has get beaten that week. You know, that's we've got a licence to do that, you know. But we certainly won't spend you know, too much time looking back at those games, you know, and that we like to think that we've got the ear of the audience at large. And don't get me wrong, if on Saturday, if there's a few jokes flying about, a few lines flying about Celtic and the position they find themselves in now, then suddenly the Rangers fans that are tuned in, they'll lap that up. And the same in the past, if you even go back to the biggest Rangers story of all time, 2012, when the whole club or the company, depending on who you speak to, imploded. Then when you were having any wee jokes or anything about that, then the Celtic fans lapped that up. So with Celtic and Rangers fans who tune into the programme, as long as you're having a wee laugh about both of them, then I think it's absolutely fine.
No, I totally agree with you there. And I've always said that. It's like two people in the playground, he said, she said, that's what it's like between the both of them. But you mentioned two results last night there, and for a minute I thought you were going to say Motherwell 3, St Mirren 0 and Motherwell 3, Kilmarnock 0. That's just what I thought you were going to touch on. I think
great
the last
results.
time somebody get 6 points in a day was when my mum was driving the motor, but anyway. Not terrific that we're up to 5th as well. And I'd imagine on the show that you've had your fair amount of abuse. I feel for him, fans.
Aye, but you know what? See, genuinely, see, as long as it always comes from both ends at different times, I'm quite happy about that, you know. And I get folk bizarrely as well saying to me, Stephen, that oh, what's it like, Tam, if you're out in a pub in Glasgow or anything like that? Do you ever get any hassle? And I say, no, I don't, and touch wood, I never will. I'm very good. I like to think being generous with my time with people and spending time a day with folk and having a laugh and a joke with them and all the rest of it. And if I'm in a pub or anything like that in Glasgow, because I live in Glasgow now and I have done for a few years, then if guys come up to me, I don't care who they support or anything like that, I'll stand and engage with them or buy them a drink and have a blather with them. And I think as long as you're always seen as mixing it up with Rangers and Celtic, you know, and I've been accused, MD in the media is always accused of being a Rangers or a Celtic fan, right? So don't get me wrong, in my time, Cowan, he says Motherwell, he's really a Rangers fan. Cowan, he says Motherwell, he's really a Celtic fan. As long as they always mix it about, I'm absolutely happy. And I genuinely think, my heart of hearts, that people appreciate that. I've been booked to work I'm thinking back pre-March, pre-COVID. I remember being booked at what was a Rangers do in the Crown Plaza Hotel opposite the BBC. And we had a smashing night that night. And it wasn't as if anybody was saying, oh, Cowan, he's a Celtic fan. No, they knew that I was a Motherwell fan. By the same token, a few months before that, I was booked at a do for a Celtic supporters club in Rutherglen. And we went there and we had a smashing night as well. And I was in a laugh with them all. And it wasn't if anybody was thinking that, oh, Cowan, what's he doing here? He's a Rangers fan. Nobody thought any of the sort. They know I'm a Motherwell fan, you know. And I sometimes feel sorry, Stephen, see for the folk that, oh, he's a Rangers fan, he's a Celtic fan. I mean, I get my first Motherwell season ticket for my 10th birthday, 1979. I've renewed my season ticket every year since then. I've been at every game that my work will allow. And what I mean by that is I'm very lucky geographically, unlike poor Stuart Cosgrove. Since we started doing the radio and it's based in Glasgow, his games on a Saturday, unless St Johnstone are playing at Motherwell, Hamilton, Celtic or Rangers, he can't get to the games on a Saturday. I'm lucky. I can jump out in the car and I can get to Firth Park for all the home games, and I can go to the away games that are within that wee radius as well. So, you know, I don't need to flash my credentials to any Celtic or Rangers fans who might think that I support their mortal enemy. It's an absolute nonsense. And even when they boiled into the stuff, Celtic Rangers, the religious side of it and all that, if you ask any of my pals that I sit at third party, you will not find somebody as least interested in religion as myself. I can't be annoyed with it. So you can't get me in any count there.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think it's just to do with our superiority complex at the end of the day, that they think everybody has a favourite side or everybody cares or this, that and the next thing.
Aye.
I couldn't really care either way, to be honest with you. And it's just because, just like they're Celtic and Rangers fans, I'm a Motherwell fan at the end of the day. Do you know what I mean?
I even remember once on the radio, had Sandy Clark. You'll remember Sandy Clark as well. Maybe known as a player, but certainly is. Eh?
Nicky Clark's dad used to be the St Johnstone manager.
Aye, see, I'm forgetting your age. You'd think of Nicky Clark first, and I think that's his father. But for me, it's still Sandy Clark. He was a brilliant, a smashing player. Airdrie, Rangers, West Ham, great goal scorer, and a nice guy. I've not seen Sandy for a while, but he's been on a lot of our shows and stuff. And I remember once he came on our show, and when I said to him about who did you support growing up, and he was saying, well, Rangers, Tam. And he grew up in Airdrie. And he said to me live on air, he said, Tam, you know what it's like? He said, I had a wee soft spot for Airdrie. He said to me, but you know what it's like growing up in Lanarkshire? You need to pick one or the other. And I remember having a wee minor argument with him on air. I said, well, Sandy, no, you don't need to pick one or the other. I says, when I was a kid, Motherwell was my team. And that was the end of the argument. I didn't think I'd had to like Celtic or Rangers. That's when you do tip into the bigotry. If you've got a team, but you think you've got to have a soft spot for Rangers or Celtic because you're a Protestant or a Catholic, then I just think that's pitiful. You know, support your team. Frank Skinner, in his autobiography, the bit that I always remember about that, Stephen, Frank's a West Bromwich Albion fan. And he said in his book that when it comes to supporting a football team, he says, where you live, you should get out the map and get out a ruler and just judge what is the nearest stadium to your house, and that should be your team. Support your local sheriff. And that was certainly true of me.
Well, I'm quite fortunate because I stay in Motherwell now, so that would be... I'm lucky that I'm not a Celtic fan, to be honest, because I wouldn't have any other way. I think that...
Where is it you live now?
I'm Rutherglen, mate. I'm Rutherglen.
Well, you're Rutherglen?
I've always stayed here, but I don't know. I mentioned that earlier when you said what, you grew up with my dad Motherwell. But no, you mentioned that you grew up with my dad Motherwell, right? And you said that you played football. You wanted me to ask this. I'm kind of getting off on a tangent, but just while it's in my head. How good a goalie was he? Because my dad says everybody used to talk about how good a keeper he was.
Right, well, you know what I kind of remember? You asked your dad, we used to play up, see where the kind of Daisy Park Centre is in Motherwell?
Yep.
There used to be good parks up that way. And I remember playing with your dad up that way. And what I remember though, sadly, about your dad, I think he always had better gear than he did have goalkeeping skills. I always remember he seemed to have right good gloves and all that. See in the same way, you got all these Tadgers that play senior professional football now, and they've got gold boots and luminous yellow boots, but they can't fucking pass a ball. Then your dad was a wee bit like that. He always had the good gear, but he wasn't particularly good. In fact, I dare I say it, I think you would be better in goals than your dad was.
Hey, I'm a good goalie anyway. I can't wait to hear that back, by the way, honestly. But no, you were talking about Sandy Clark there, and you mentioned that you had a wee bit of an argument on Irvine. Is there any guests that have ever come in and have just been a nightmare to work with?
Yes. Hue and cry. Pat Kane and Greg Kane. It was mainly Pat Kane, but this is just one that will go to my grave with me. I hated it because by and large, you saw the kind of atmosphere that we try to create in the studio when we get guests in. We just try to make it nice, relaxed, get you a wee drink for sitting there and have a laugh, you know. But about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, Pat Kane and his brother Greg were booked to do the show. And we had also booked that day Ruth Davidson, the Scottish Tory leader, right? Now, needless to say, the politics of Pat and Greg Kane and Ruth Davidson, miles apart, right? But they came in, they were quite happy to come in and do the show. But throughout the show, Pat Kane, particularly because he's very, very political, he almost sat like on the half turn, like I'm doing with you now, when Ruth was there, as if he was blanking her, right? Giving her the dizzy. And it was awful. It was horrible. And anything that she said, he would audibly tut and raise his eyebrows and all that, you know. And it was awful. And the bottom line was, we knew that politically they were miles apart, right? That's fair enough, right? Everybody's entitled to their opinion. But it was the height of bad manners. And when we finished the show, we always, as we did with you as well, if you remember, we got a cracking photo outside the studio. We did that with everybody. And this was pre-COVID. So we were able to stand together like a wee team photo, right? And they had myself and Stuart as the bookends. We had Hugh and Cry, Pat and Greg Kane in the middle with Ruth Davidson. And just as our wee production assistant was about to take the photo, she was just about to click it to take the photo. And Pat walked out of the shot and he said, "Oh, I can't do this. I can't do this," you know. And it was just for effect, as if he's saying he couldn't have his photograph taken with the leader of the Scottish Conservative Party. Now, everybody's entitled to their political opinion, but this was shabby, you know. And the bottom line was, Stephen, when our producer had booked Pat Kane for that show, he told them, he said, "Oh, by the way, the other guest is Ruth Davidson, the Scottish Conservative leader." He didn't at that point say, "Oh, no, count me out. I don't want to be doing the show that day." Because the bottom line was, what he was in to plug that particular week was a Hue and Cry tour that they were doing and a Hue and Cry album that they had just released. So because, thankfully, we've got a big audience out there, he wasn't going to miss that opportunity to come on and plug the tour and the album. So he didn't care in that respect about who he was sitting next to, but he just felt he had to make that stance. And it was really, really horrible for us because, again, going back to the atmosphere that we try to create during a programme. After it, they went away, Ruth Davidson went away, but me and Stuart felt absolutely horrible. And I remember going home that night. I'd gone out to the Motherwell game during the day, I'd gone home at night, and I felt terrible. And I was sitting watching the telly, and I says, I still feel rotten about this. So I phoned Stevie, our producer, and I says, "Have you got a number there for Ruth Davidson?" And he texted me the number, and I sent her a wee text, and I says, "Ruth," I says, "Hi, it's Tam Cowan here. I'm really, really sorry about that ugly scene at the end of the show today. I can assure you, me and Stuart feel rotten about it. It's not the spirit we try to create with our programmes and all the rest of it, blah, 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 blah." And she just got back to me, and it was great. And I'm telling you, this is another exclusive. She just got back to me, and she says, "Tam, it was water up off a duck's back. I can assure you I've dealt with bigger arseholes than him." And that was it. And it was brilliant.
I mean, it's not as if you're asking them to be pen pals at the end of the day. You're literally
I know. Exactly. It was farcical.
And then move on with their life. But I've talked a bit about off the ball there, but obviously you're a food critic as well, and I want to talk about how you got into that. Am I right in saying it was Martin Clark, that, the editor, that came up and said to you that they wanted to start a food column, but
That's right.
But it not to be like too posh or anything like that, just to be like.
That's right. When I joined, I'd started out in newspapers a long time ago now, 1991. It was a great year for me to start as a columnist with Evening Times because, again, Motherwell fan writing in a Glasgow paper. And that year we were charging towards the 91 Cup final in May. So I had stacks to write about. It was brilliant. And as a Motherwell fan in a Glasgow paper, I was able to have a go at Celtic and Rangers, giving them both barrels. So that was great as well. And I had 7 or 8 great years there. But it was still a local, a regional paper, whatever you want to call it. So needless to say, when the Daily Record came in for me, and that was always a paper my dad brought into the house when I was growing up. When he came home for Honeywell's, he'd always have the Daily Record folded up in his Parker jacket, opened at the racing section, and I would read the Daily Record. And so when they asked me to go to the Daily Record, that was a no-brainer. So I signed up to write columns about the football, 1998, September. But the editor, who you correctly named, Martin Clark, he was launching a magazine, still the same magazine that you get inside the Daily Record now. They were actually launching it, coincidentally, the week that I was joining the Record. So he said, listen, I want you to do something for the magazine as well. And of course, we'll put that in your contract, we'll pay you for that as well. And I'm a firm believer in only trying to stick to stuff that you know about, you know. And I said to him, I said, right, I'll do something for the magazine if it's something that I'm interested in. And he said, right, what are your interests? And now I was 1998, footloose and fancy free, single man, you know, going out and about pubs, restaurants, all the rest of it, doing a power of ride in our kind of Patterson Street way in Motherwell, picking up all the birds there. And
that'll not be my aunties, by the way, that's where they stayed.
I was like Mary your ma.
Alright, fucking right. Move on, back to the story.
Aye, no, I didn't want to cut your grass. But so I was footloose and fancy free. I was eating out all through the week. I was a hell of a lot bigger than I am now. I was probably about 18, 19 stone. And I said, right, if it's something I'm interested in, he asked me, what you interested in? I said, well, I've got a very active social life. I like, you know, eating and drinking and all that, you know. He said, right, we don't have a restaurant reviewer. And he says, I want you to be a restaurant reviewer. He says, but I want you to do it very much in the same way you write all your other stuff. I want you to do it as a punter. Get into restaurants, you know, hoping that you get a decent experience, the food's all right, and you're not paying a fortune for it. And that's what I did. And it was amazing. It really, really, really took off. For the first time in my professional life, for a relatively short spell like that had been, suddenly folk weren't talking to me about the football or Motherwell or the rest of it. Folk kept wanting to talk to me about what restaurant I was going to this week or where I could recommend in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Motherwell, Aberdeen, wherever it might have been. So it was fantastic. And it was a huge part of my life, including when I then moved, get my Maurice Johnston transfer, if you like, from the Daily Record to the Scottish Sun in 2014. The first thing my editor there was wanting me to do was keep doing the restaurant reviews. And to bring it right up to date, when I finished up with the Scottish Sun last year in 2019, just a victim of the cost cutting at newspapers now. Print newspapers are having a terrible, terrible, terrible time. You know, it's an absolute dying industry. It's a real, real shame. So when I was one of the casualties last year, the BBC were very keen on me doing a kind of a food podcast. So we've been working on them for the past couple of months, and they're going kind of live in the start of 2021. So it's still something that I'm very, very passionate about, the food and a wee glass of wine.
Can you beat it? Can you beat it? And what kind of a criteria do you look for when you get in a restaurant then?
You're looking for value for money. In my personal opinion, you're looking for food that's for the common man, if you like. I mean, I was proud of the fact that in the near 30 years, 22, 21 years that I did restaurants, I steered well away from the Michelin star kind of places and all that, you know. I wanted to go places where you get a good, honest feed. Ideally, trying to help family businesses. I still do that via my Instagram. I still kind of do a wee bit of restaurant reviewing on that. There's so many people who know me for that, and they've invited me to go to their restaurants pre-COVID, post-COVID, and they're just looking for a wee bit of, you know, a wee bit of publicity and stuff. And I'm always delighted to do that. So I was always going into restaurants just looking for a good night, no spend too much in the bill, decent bit of scran, friendly place, nice surroundings. Wasn't too much to ask for, and I had an absolute ball doing it.
Yeah, you said you had a ball, and I assume you were 9 times out of 10. But have you had any unpleasant experiences?
Oh God, aye. I mean, the odd one. I mean, the one where I went into a so-called Italian restaurant in Glasgow, no far from the King's Theatre. That's as close as I'll take you. And it turned out this Italian restaurant. Now, you get into any Italian restaurant, you're going to always hear a wee bit of Italian, even if it's Scottish owned, let's say, but they'll hire a wee couple of Italian waiters or waitresses just to get the right feel, you know. But I went into this particular Italian restaurant. This was way, way, way back. And it was a Russian couple who owned it. And the husband, the Russian husband, was in the kitchen. He was a chef. And the wife, she was front of house, stroke waitress. She was dealing with everybody that came in. And it was awful. It was absolutely garbage. The whole place was terrible. The service was terrible. The food was terrible. Everything about it was rotten. So lo and behold, I gave it a bit of a stinking write-up, which was justified. And the interesting thing was, the minute I gave it a stinking write-up, I remember at the time, letters. You were still getting letters back in the day. This was 1999, maybe 2000. No, everybody was doing email. I get letters into the paper from folks saying, Tam, I'm so glad you've exposed this place. We'd gone there before. It was terrible. They're getting away with murder. Good on you for saying and telling folk that it was crap and to avoid it. So I thought, good on them for writing into me. At least I know I've got it right, you know, because I was a wee bit wary. Was it maybe just me that had a bad experience? But sixth sense, I thought, no, this place is terrible. I bet a lot of folk have been conned out their money here, paying money for crap food. So anyway, cut a long story short, after it went in the paper on the Saturday, in the Saturday magazine, on the Monday morning, I was told that a taxi pulled up outside the Daily Record offices in the Brumelaw in Glasgow, and a guy got out the taxi in full chef whites and the chef hats, and he checked trousers that they all wear, and the Crocs and all that, you know. And just as he got out the taxi, he was seen going into his inside pocket and taking a last swig out of a wee half bottle of something, bottle of vodka or whatever, you know. And he stormed into the Daily Record offices and he was demanding to speak to me. He was the owner, stroke chef of this place that I'd slaughtered on a Saturday. And he was demanding to speak to me and saying what he was going to do to me and how he was going to get his lawyers on board, blah, 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 blah. Now, I have never, ever, ever worked in a newspaper office. Since starting out as a columnist when I was just a young boy with the Evening Times, I'd always done everything from home. And so they said, look, Tam's not here. You know, that's, you know, but he insisted that I was sitting up the stairs in an office, and eventually security get called, threat of the police and all that, and he was escorted for the premises. But that was the hairiest time, if you like, and that was with me just being honest.
Very frightening, eh? No, but what I liked about obviously I did a wee bit of research as you do before these. What I liked about something that you said was that the deal is that you go in as a paying customer. So
absolutely,
you give your money. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And you actually get people asking if they give it for nothing. Is that right?
You'd get a flippy basin. You'd get readers and punters that you meet saying, "Oh, it's all right for you getting in getting free grub." Now, don't get me wrong. Every month or whatever, you would file your expenses to the paper, and you would get reimbursed for whatever the bill had been in the restaurant. But in terms of making the whole thing legitimate, when you were in the restaurant at night, you always get the bill and you always paid the bill. and without you paying the bill, my rule was that you couldn't do a review, because if you didn't pay a bill or if you got a freebie, then it was kind of tarnished. You know what I mean? But the minute you'd paid the bill, giving them the money for the food and the drink you'd had, then anything goes. And I felt obliged to write up my review then fairly and squarely. And you know, don't get me wrong, you're not a person who, if folk happen to recognise you when you walked into the restaurant, or they heard the voice and recognised that, folks there have got a very, very distinctive voice that folk, oh, it's just been all the years in the radio, of course, you know. But if folk recognised you in a restaurant, there was quite a few times at the end of the meal when they realised you were in doing a review, they maybe come up to you, the owner, the manager, whatever, and they said, Tam, you doing a review? And you'd say, yep. And you'd only tell them that when the review was finished, and when my wee notebook or whatever was tucked back in my pocket and all that, and the review was done. And I'd say, yes, I was. I wasn't going to lie, you know. And they'd say, what happens now? Do we get this? Do you pay for it? I said, no. I pay for it. I always pay for it. And I would pay the bill, and that was it. And then that meant the whole thing was absolutely legitimate.
Brilliant. And the last question on the food. You can have dinner with 4 people. Who's gone with you? Celebrities, football players, and what's your specialist dish?
Right, I like these questions. Is it dead or alive?
Dead or alive.
Right. Well, my ultimate football hero, and you maybe know who I'm going to say, Davy Cooper. As much as I loved him at Motherwell when he arrived in 1989, and everything that he did at the club and the mesmerising performances that I watched, that was a good a good few years before I broke into the media scene. So I never, ever got to meet him. He died actually the year that me and Stuart started our partnerships. I never get a chance to get him on the radio ways or then. So I never met the man. And I would just love to, I would love him to be at the dinner table with me. I just thank him for everything he did for Motherwell and indeed Scottish football. He was brilliant with Rangers, great with Clydebank when he started out, and indeed finished there after Motherwell. Brilliant with Scotland. That penalty that he took against Wales took nerves of steel. So I would love to sit with him and just chat about football, the great Motherwell team that he was part of and winning the cup with us and all the rest of it. Another one that we've never managed to get on the show is Billy Connolly, the funniest man ever. And I'm so proud that the funniest man ever was Scottish. I'd love to get him as my dinner guest as well, just then to have a chat with him. So I've got somebody for the 91 team, Davy Cooper. I've got Billy Connolly. Who else am I allowed? I'll chuck in a singer. I'm a big fan of Engelbert Humperdinck, and I've met him a couple of times. I did a show with him, and that involved me going down to his kind of stately home in Leicestershire. He mainly lives in Los Angeles, but we got him out in England, and I would love to have him sitting at a dinner table as well. And just because she's my number one star, I'll have my wee lassie sitting there as well, my daughter Sophie, to sit there and she would just take the piss out of me. She likes having a wee laugh at my expense.
There you go, Stuart. You've worked with Tam for 25 years, but you're getting fucked out for Engelbert Humperdinck. There you go.
Well, you know, Stuart's got really, really bad eczema, so I don't like sitting next to him when I'm eating.
Good point. No, but I want to move on just as we come up towards the end. I want to move on and talk about offside. How did that come about?
Well, we did offside, which I have fond memories of because it was a huge part of my life. And probably the house that I'm sitting in now probably bought my house. We did that. I did that for 9 years in total. 7 years on BBC One. 2 years before that on what was called BBC Choice Scotland. we kind of satellite station, BBC Choice Scotland, BBC Choice England, BBC Choice Wales, BBC Choice Ireland, all get merged in about 2001 to become BBC 4, which is still here. But that was how I got into doing offside. We did it for 2 years on BBC Choice Scotland, and it was basically in the back of Off the Ball and my newspaper stuff. We did 3 years off the ball by that point. I was still doing the newspapers, and the commissioning editor at BBC Scotland, who's just a pal of mine now, Ewan Angus, he fancied giving me a wee crack at the telly. So we did offside, and for all the years we did it, I loved it. And for the 7 years that we did it on BBC One, 10:35 on a Monday night, it was probably the happiest times of my life. It was with absolutely brilliant guests. We had a great studio audience, a live studio audience every single week. We recorded it. We started the recording maybe about 8 o'clock on a Monday night. We did it as live, no fucking about. We couldn't stop and start and all that. We did it as live so that they could then put it out on the telly at 10:35 that same night. And it meant that we could make it as topical as was humanly possible. If a story broke that night in Scottish football, we were able to maybe get a wee joke in about it, which was always a winner with the audience in the studio and the audience at home. So great times. I've got very, very fond memories of doing that.
No, it's something that I loved watching as a youngster as well. It was plenty of memorable guests on it.
Did you never come in for a recording?
No, I never managed to get in. Don't know how.
I thought you did.
I didn't have money at that point. But no. I managed to see Off the Ball at Rugby Park Hotel, but I never got to see Offside.
Right.
But, no, it was a great show and plenty of memorable guests, as you mentioned. Who's the most memorable you had on? And I take it that's where the Yuri Geller story will be tied into Offside.
Well, well remembered. I wouldn't say it was the most memorable, but Yuri Geller, when he came on the show, as much as I thought the stuff about him up in the helicopter and moving the ball when Gary McAllister took the penalty at United 6, as much as I and everybody else thought that was complete and utter shite, right? When he came on the show, I must say it was rather fascinating. He came in, before we started recording the show, he came up to me in the green room and he said, "Tam, before we go on the show, can I see you in your dressing room? Because I want you to draw something for me that will show on the programme." And I said, right. And this was apparently something he always did when he was appearing in a telly show. So I remember sitting there with him in my dressing room, and I had a clipboard and a pen. And he said, right, I want you to draw something and look at me. Just look at me in the eye as you're drawing it, and then fold it up and put it in your shirt pocket that you'll be wearing on the show, and leave it there until we're doing the programme, right? And I thought, right, fair enough. So I'd done all that, stuck it in my shirt pocket. We went out, we recorded the programme. Midway during his interview, he said, "Now, Tam, I asked you when we were in your dressing room earlier tonight to draw something, stick it in, and stare at me while you were drawing it." I says, "Yeah." He says, "I would now like you to bring it out your pocket, unfold it, and then in the count of 1, 2, 3, show it to the audience. And before you do that, look at me again and I will draw what I think you have drawn," right? So I says, right, okay, play along. So I was staring at him, looking with my hand on the wee folded up drawing that I had in my shirt pocket. I'm staring at him. He's scribbling away, and he says, "Right, Tam, 1, 2, 3, go." And I held this up to the camera, held it up to the audience, and I had done a picture of a cat, right? Normal picture of a cat with the body, the head, the whiskers, right, the paws. And Yuri Geller showed his drawing to the camera and the audience, and it was almost exactly the same. Now, a lot of folks said to me after it, "Oh, candidates asked to draw anything. They would draw a cat, or they'd draw a house, or they'd maybe draw a tree, or they'd draw the sun," right? Usual stuff. But I said, but even then, the dimensions what he had drawn in terms of how it fitted onto the A4 sheet of paper. It was almost a replica. So that was incredible, right? But I let that one go. But in terms of him doing anything about bending spoons or anything like that, he refuses to do that in a live telly show, because many years ago, I think way back in the 70s, he went on an American show, an American chat show, and they were clearly trying to kind of catch him out or try to ridicule him. And they brought in reinforced steel cutlery. And when he was trying to do his stuff with rubbing the cutlery. Well, exactly. And he was trying to bend the spoons and all that, right? They were just being a wee bit devious, right? So he refuses, anything that appears on now, refuses to do any of that stuff. So when we had spoken to him before the show, he said, look, if you want me to do anything with the spoon bender, I'll do it after the show. He said, you've got a studio audience in. I work with audiences all the time. I'll do it in front of the audience, but I can't do it on camera. We said, fair enough, you know. So we finished the show. I'd actually forgotten about it. But we finished the show and we were just about to go, right, ladies and gentlemen, the cameras had stopped rolling. Ladies and gentlemen, big thanks, Yuri Geller. And then Yuri said, do you want me to do something for the crowd, Tam? And I said, absolutely, you know. So what he then did next, Stephen, it was incredible. He said to the studio audience, now we were allowed in with the regulations and all that about the size and not, I think we were allowed in maybe 280 people in the studio at Queen Margaret Drive, the old BBC. And he said to the audience, he said, right, would you stand up, anyone who would like to take part in one of my tricks, stunts, whatever you want to call it. So out of the 280 people, there was maybe, I reckon, about 80% of them stood up. They were all up for it, right? 80% of them stood up. He says, now...
Another 20% the disabled section.
Well, no. They were all down the front and we'd already moved them out because you're normally a fire hazard. Right? So you were out early, we couldn't have that. Cheeky bastard. But they stood up, those who were able, and out of the 80% of that crowd that stood up, he said to them, right, if you've got a bunch of keys in your pocket, and if you're up for this, put the keys in your hands like that, clasp them in your hands. And after me, and he did it, he said, just say 1, 2, 3, bend, 1, 2, 3, bend, 1, 2, 3, bend. And I was watching them all doing it. And he says, right, open your hands. And he opened. And out of that crowd that had stood up, I think about 65, 70% of them looked at their keys and one of their keys was bent. And I saw this. I watched this with my own eyes, right? Now, the only logical explanation is that Yuri Geller, when he knew he was coming on the programme, had managed to block book tickets for the audience to get all his pals in, all the stooges, all the plants, but that hadn't happened. There was faces that I recognised who used to come every week, you know. So whenever MD has a go at Yuri Geller, including myself, that's the one thing that I always remember, that was quite spooky what he did with the keys.
That's fascinating, absolutely fascinating, honestly. I can't believe that. That's mental. But anyway, before I let you go, I just want to say, obviously, thanks for letting me come on off the ball and stuff and things like that. What we spoke about was obviously what we need to do for disabled people in football when I was on. What's the one thing that you think needs to change, just to close us out?
The thing that always bamboozles me, ever since I get involved with the Motherwell Disabled Supporters Association and with the Scottish Disabled Supporters Association, which me and Stuart are patrons with stuff that we've done with them in the past, the recurring thing that always staggers me, and you're probably going to guess what I'm going to say, I can't believe the terrible view that you get at so many grounds when it's like a worm's eye view. You're at pitch level. And I vividly remember you saying to me that I think Dundee, Dens Park, is maybe one of the better ones where you've got a raised platform behind the goals and you've got a better view of the game. A simple thing like that, because I remember, Stephen, going back to when you would get your tickets with your pals at Parkhead or Ibrox, and you'd get that wee section, like a wee tangerine segment near the corner flag at Parkhead or Ibrox. And when one of your pals, whichever pal was left to get the tickets for you going, you dreaded looking to see what ticket you had in case you were at row AA or something, and you were right down the front, and you were like that trying to watch the game. Yeah. And you wouldn't have a Scooby what happened in the game until you watched the highlights at night or whatever. So when you brought that subject up on Off the Ball about the terrible, terrible view that you get at some games, I just think that's horrendous. I would like to fix that.
Yeah, that was my main reason for starting this channel, was just to make that difference. I think we need to be the ones to lead the change, and that's certainly what I hope to do. But no, Tam, thanks very much for coming on, mate. It means a lot. I know you want to get to watch the chase, so I'll let you catch the tail end it.
Well, I'll be lucky if I get in for the start Off the Ball tomorrow now.
Anyway, no, but I'll be listening in tomorrow. Thanks very much, mate, honestly. And
all the best. Good luck to you, Stephen.
This is the first podcast, so please, there'll be many more of these coming every couple of weeks, so please click that subscribe button if you want to see more. Thanks, guys. See you later.